Hello and welcome to On the Kerbs. I'm your host, Team Hours Daily. Joining me this week is rally driver Nabila Tejpar. We caught up recently to chat about how she got into motorsport, what more can be done to champion diversity in motorsport, some of her favourite racing memories, what kind of game show she'd love to create, and much more. So without any further ado, let's just get straight into it, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. So, hi Nabila, thanks for being here today. First of all, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you for having me. Looking forward to that.
It's our pleasure. So, first thing I like to ask everyone that I bring onto this podcast, what first got you interested in motorsport?
So I've been interested in motorsport since I was a little girl. My granddad and my dad used to compete in rallying, and so it's kind of been one of those generational family things for us. And Dad used to take me to events when I was little, the old RAC as it was back in the day, and I used to love just waking up at really, really early in the morning, driving over to Wales and then going and standing in the forest. I mean, nothing really beats cold, wet, rainy Wales, does it? But
Especially early in the morning as well, don't forget.
oh yeah. It was actually kind of fun. He used to make me like a little bed in the back of the car, and I used to go to sleep on the way. And yeah, I just used to love it. And I always joked and said, I want to be a racing driver when I'm older, but I never actually believed that that's possible at all. But yeah, it kind of just stems from that really. And then we used to just watch racing on TV when it was on, or my dad was rallying before I turned probably around 5 or 6, and then my mum made him stop because he had quite a big accident. So he stopped until around 2009 then, when he started doing the Safari Classic again. But yeah, it just kind of runs through our veins.
It's addictive, so it's not too surprising,
100%.
really.
Yeah.
And you say like thinking, oh, it's a nice dream, but it might not happen. And you went from that to being BRC Ladies Champion in 2017, 2018. How did that
I
feel?
think it all came as a little bit of honestly, me starting motorsport was random. There was never any plan towards it. And I think it was kind of cool that I managed to achieve that quite early on in my career. And I remember literally, I tried a car when I was 16 years old, and I instantly fell in love, and I took that information back to my parents. And I just got laughed at when I said, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I just had that feeling that this is what I was meant to do. And my parents were like, no, you've never expressed any interest. I'm like, technically I have. I joked around saying I wanted to be a racing driver when I was younger. I feel like that's enough interest. But they're like, yeah, but you have no experience. It's not a life plan. Like, so they made me go to university first. So I did all of that. I did all my academic stuff. And then it just never left that feeling for me. So in 2015, I jumped in a car and started, and then just kind of like rolled with it. And it was really awesome that all of that happened in the process. But I don't think I ever really expected any of it. It was just kind of like a happy coincidence that all of that kind of came to fruition at the same time.
It's kind of good. And kind of good and frustrating, I imagine, in some ways. So on the one hand, it's good that you went through all of university and you still had that feeling as reiterated in you, and you're like, yeah, no, I've done all this. I'm really sure this is what I want to do now. But at the same time, then frustrating that you still had to wait to get onto the other side of that before you could properly get into it.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was exactly that. It was very frustrating that I had to wait, but also I lost those years at the same time. So every year I didn't start competing was another year behind I was when I went into the British Championship with everybody else. And I think that's always the thing that frustrated me the most when I started my career, was I was always behind, because a lot of the younger people, like a lot of the guys, they start a lot younger. They start in Formula 1000s when they're like 14, 15 years old. And then by the time they're 17 and getting their licenses, they already have pretty good experience before they head out into the forest for a BTRDA event or something. And I'm here like playing catch up at 21 going, I don't have time to do all of that. I just have to go straight into BRC and pray to God that, I learn while I'm doing. Yeah. And so, I mean, if I could tell my younger self, like, get into karting or go get into motorsports early, I would 100% do it. But at that time, there was no role models available to someone like me. And even my dad was like, I didn't see it as an option. Like, I didn't see anybody doing it. And I think that's exactly it. Like if you don't see the person doing it,
It doesn't
then
quite click in
you
your
kind
mind
of
that it's actually possible then.
exactly that.
But it's good on the other side of it that you need that passion that you clearly have for it to make sure that you can keep going back to it and to then be determined enough to stick at it then. And it's like, okay, you have to wait a bit, but at least you have that passion that proves that this is, again, definitely what you want to be doing, because otherwise you see how much of a challenge it would be and think, you know what, actually, maybe not.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like I don't know how like I managed to commit to the whole thing and like, but honestly it was my life. Like it is my life. And I couldn't find any other thing that occupied my time or that I was passionate enough about that could take away motorsport from me, if that makes sense. Like
other things were good,
you
but
do
it's never
have
going to
to
top that.
exactly. And now being where I'm at, I have definitely had the chance to live what I'm most passionate about. And it's so hard coming out of that, going, well, I was one of those people that actually loved what I did and got the chance to do what I love. And now you sit there and go, other people don't have that opportunity. And I feel bad for them. Like,
It's a weird feeling.
what is there any way to weird life? Yeah. And you kind of like the 9 to 5 jobs and stuff, they don't interest me. It's like ridiculously crazy. But yeah, I definitely think
definitely easier, I feel like, to go from the 9 to 5 to that rather than from that to the 9 to 5 then.
Precisely. I definitely did it the wrong way around. But I think that's exactly what people like us can do at the moment, though, is like you talking to people who are involved in motorsport and getting that kind of word out there, and me kind of breaking that mold and getting into the driving side of things. We can talk about it more and we can encourage like the younger generations and show them like it's possible and there's more access to information now. I
There's
mean,
more
simple
ways to get it
videos
out
like
there.
this. Exactly. And I think that's extremely important if we want to see more people getting into the sport as time goes on. Because back when I was younger, we didn't have social media where like people were doing interviews and things with all these drivers. Because I would have probably watched it and go, it is possible. Do you know what I mean? But
so the closest thing you get to that would be watching it on TV with like proper, like proper journalists and all this kind of thing. So
exactly. And even then, like rallying particularly never had any female presence except for in the 80s, but I wasn't quite alive in the 80s. And by then, Michelle Moutar wasn't as big of a deal. Do you know what I mean? Like she's still the greatest female rally driver of all time, but she kind of disappeared a little bit in like my younger years. And people like Molly Taylor and that didn't start coming out probably until the late 2000s. So
no, you're
there
in
was that big chunk
between.
of time. Yeah. Exactly.
But it's encouraging as well, at least, to see that there are people coming up now. It's like you've said, like Molly Taylor, Christine GZs, all these kind of people. It's like, okay, they do exist still. It wasn't just a one-off back in the 80s. We do have more people now.
Precisely. And I think that's the only way like we can continue to move forward is showing that there are these people involved now and there is that kind of progression involved. Because I think a lot of people look at it and go, yeah, but where do you go? And I'm like, there is a progression. You can start BRC, you can go to European Championship, you can go to WRC2. Like there is a progression. And even now in racing, as much as I'm like, it's a double-edged sword W series, I still think it's fantastic in the sense of it provides an opportunity for women to get to that level. And so
it's
I think we've now
having that need for it in the first place, which is like ideally it's so successful that we don't need it, but you at the same time you still appreciate what it's trying to do. So
yes, and I think what's frustrating is when you see drivers going back to it consistently and not making that step up, because the whole point is it's meant to be that step up. And so you sit there and go, is it just not possible to make that step up? Or like, what is that boundary?
We say it all the time. There's another F1 podcast that I'm on where every opportunity we go is like, so there's might be a seat enough too. We're going to put Jamie Chadwick in that one. And every opportunity is like, come on, what's the point otherwise?
Exactly. And I think now is that kind of perfect timing. Although we've got the base layers down, it's how do we build on top of that to prove that you can make it to that top level? I mean, Tatiana Calderon coming out to IndyCar, I think that's a great step. And I hope to see a lot more of like W Series, maybe considering that as an alternative option. So, you know, and I mean, IndyCar is going to become a growing, well, it is a growing series. and it is becoming a worldwide. I mean, you've got Romain Grosjean going over there. Marcus Ericsson just won the Indy 500. And I think it's really interesting to see how much American motorsports can become global if allowed. So
I think particularly in the last couple of years, you've seen more drivers from European background, like people from F2 who were hoping to make it to F1 or ex-F1 drivers, or Tatiana, like you're saying, kind of just, oh, there is another thing over here and it's pretty decent actually. And you see as a result of that, all the fans then flock with them, and you just see how many more opportunities it opens up, like you're saying before, just wasn't there before. And it's just, at least there's the opportunity. And then after that, fine. But at least we get the chance.
Yeah. And I think what's great about that is it's a theory that has so much competition. Like any given driver could win on a race weekend. And there is a lot of excitement around that. And I think if we can open up motorsports to being more than just F1 as the pinnacle, you'll find a lot more people progressing and achieving that kind of ultimate top level of motorsport. You've just got to be open to changing it from one specific avenue.
Going back to you slightly there, Sam, which I feel like we could escalate slightly into a question I'll go for later, which you might have already answered. But is it the family tie for you then, or what is it about rallying that you love so much?
Definitely the family ties was a big thing. Like, it's really nice to be able to carry on that kind of generational feel. Like, I never got the chance to meet my grandfather, and I think it's really cool that I still get to kind of live his legacy on a little bit. And I know Dad, it's something that Dad and I have in common and something that we can do together, which is really nice because, I mean, not every daughter and their dad has a great, like, passion that they can work towards together. And I've been really lucky that my family has fully supported my whole career and they've been there from like the beginning. So really definitely family ties, and it brought my family together for sure. And then the adrenaline that you get with it, but kind of also that feeling when you're on a stage and every season hits you all in one go, and you've got like a little bit of gravel on the tarmac, or it's chucking it down with rain and there's mud everywhere. Like, I just don't feel I would have ever found that much love on a racetrack. And so for me, it's the hardest thing for a driver, I feel, to explain that feeling of what you get when you sit in a rally car. It's indescribable.
So I won't try and pressure you to describe it anymore. But I will say that when I was doing my research for this, I noticed that the Wales Rally was one of the ones that you did do. I want to know how that experience was, and especially you got some air, which you were probably going for at that time.
So jumps are probably my favorite thing.
I'm not surprised.
I don't know why. I just enjoy it and I commit to it, and I'm like, do you know what? We've got to get this car as high as it can go. I definitely did the same on Rally Portugal too, on the FAF jump. But Wales Rally GB was an incredible experience. I'll be honest, like, I was always wary of those stages. Like, my first ever rally used some of those stages. It was mid-Wales, so we used like Haffrin and Maherin in that. And that was my first ever rally in the forest. Like, I'd never been in the forest before. And I remember sitting on the start line of that mid-Wales going, what the hell am I doing? Like, it's pitch black outside. I haven't even driven a stage in the forest in the daylight, and I'm trying to do this at night. And 4 miles into it, I definitely tore the drive shaft because it was snowing on Recce, and there was a rock in the corner that I didn't see because obviously it was covered in snow, and I cut that. It's always a rock. But yeah, and I think that led to, and just watching Wales Rally GB when I was a kid, it's kind of like there was always that feeling of, I mean, this is the pinnacle of British rallying. Like, everybody has driven these stages, and it's incredible. And yeah, I loved it. And just the whole experience of doing a WRC event, they're very, very difficult. Like, there's a lot going on all the time. The stages are really, really long, and you kind of just have to be on it all the time. And I remember I started off those, like, the first time I did it, and I was like very, very nervous. But as time kind of went on, I settled in. And then when I went back in the Peugeot the second time around, there was like, it was normal. And but there's still, even if the stages are the same, there's still something different every year. And I think that's what's really exciting.
So it's constantly evolving.
Yeah. And I mean, one year it was bone dry, and the next year it was chucking it down with rain. And then all of a sudden you have a dry part of the stage again, and you're like, oh, I kind of liked the muddy wet because I feel like it compacts it more. So personally, I preferred that than like when it was loose dry gravel. But yeah, what an
And
experience.
there's
I
the
was
extra
very,
challenge
very
then of
lucky.
you've just got used to that and it's changed again. Oh, right.
Yeah,
Switch things again.
exactly.
So then would that particular rally be your favorite racing memory, or is there another that stands out to you more?
Probably Rally Portugal and Rally Spain. I think Rally Portugal stands out to me so much because, oh my goodness, was that the toughest rally I ever did the first time. It was, especially on that, I think it's what, Amarante, it's like a 36-kilometer stage or something like that. And I remember, and I'm like, I'm not even halfway through this stage yet, and I'm tired. It was so hot. The car was so insanely hot. The stage had so many different um surfaces. Like you started off on sand, and an R2 car is not built for Rally Portugal. Like if I ever did it again, I would not ever be going back in an R2 car. I would definitely be taking a rally. Sorry, they're not R2s anymore, are they? They're Rally 2s. And I would definitely be, oh no, it's the wrong way around. Anyway, but I would definitely prefer to do it in a four-wheel drive car than the two-wheel drive car. And I remember just being halfway through that going, I kind of want to stop. I'm really tired. This is really, really difficult. This car shouldn't be on this stage. And then you kind of get to the end and you go, do you know what? No, I'm happy I did it. And in that year, don't ask me how, but I ended up 7th overall in the Portuguese national round that was. And you just kind of sit there and go, and you watch how many people just kind of don't come out. Like you would drive past cars on that stage and you just go, I made it. I actually made it. No, I'll take it. So that was a surreal
You're just happy to have
experience.
made it to the end, regardless of the position at that point, you know?
Oh, 100%. I think anyone is at that point. Like you watch all these guys going flat out in the first stage and breaking everything, and you're like, I feel like this isn't that rally. Like this isn't the flat out rally that you think it is, you know? You've got to kind of bide your time here. But yeah, definitely Rally Portugal. Plus I have a love for Portugal that's just kind of, it just brings everything together for me.
I'm saying there's that extra level of satisfaction from, like you're saying, thinking halfway through, like, maybe I'd like to stop this, and like when you get to the end, there's that extra bit of just, okay, I could do that actually.
Exactly.
So then you also, and this is probably touching on what we were talking a little bit about earlier, you champion diversity and inclusion in motorsport. What more can we, not allowed to run that, what more can we do to achieve that, according to you?
This is always a really tough question for me, and one that I always kind of struggle to answer. And when I was competing, I never really talked about it much or focused on it because it's not something that people feel comfortable addressing or talking about. So it kind of just got left the wayside. And like as years have progressed, and you know, since 2020 and the Black Lives Matter movement, I finally feel like people are now a little bit more open to having that kind of conversation. And I think it's extremely important because I mean, let's face it, as much as we hate to say it, motorsport is still primarily a white male sport. I mean, if you look at a lot of, I mean, who's leading, well, there has been changes in the FIA and things, but if you look at governing bodies and things, like it's still kind of archaic. I know they're trying to move in the right directions, but I feel like there's so much more to be done. But I feel like one of the biggest things we lack is encouragement to ethnic minorities and people from ethnic backgrounds that motorsport is inclusive and open to all. Because when you look at it on the surface, you only see a certain person, you only see a certain kind of image presented. And I think it's extremely important that we start talking about it and kind of showing and changing. So like Lewis Hamilton's Project 44, I believe it's called, or Mission 44, they're doing a good job at kind of helping engineers and people enter the realm of motorsport. And I think it's also really important for more females to be spearheaded so that, you know, young girls can see that it's an option to come in. I mean, I know if I was a kid, like if I saw a female involved, I probably would have started earlier out. That was the biggest barrier of entry for me at that age. And then I also do think like if people from ethnic backgrounds see more people like them, that kind of cultural barrier that's still there might start to subside. Because I know, I mean, my parents still from people in our community, and and they kind of question them and go, you let her race? Like, how is that even a viable career? Like, why didn't she go become a lawyer or a doctor? And my dad was like, she was never going to do that. And she wanted to do this. And we let her, do you know what I mean? Like, if there's not people like my parents who are willing to break that mold, then there kind of needs to be those people who are there showing that it's possible. And that's in any kind of sport. I don't think that that's just in motorsport. That cultural thing will forever be there, especially in Asian communities and things like that. So it's definitely interesting to see. And I'm hoping that as time progresses, we can and will change that. I just think it's something that unfortunately is not going to be a quick fix. It's going to be something that takes a long time.
And saying as well, you touched on it really, the whole idea of it looks like something on the surface, but then it's also important to realize that that's only part of it. So say if you're looking at Formula One, for example, you see all the drivers, but you forget maybe how many people are involved behind the scenes and how many jobs are in there. And it's like, yeah, they don't always get a light put onto them as well either. So it's like with the Monaco Grand Prix recently with Checo's race strategist, she got to go on the podium. And again, it's just when you do have that opportunity, make sure that they get the credit so that you can then show people that it is not just Perez is a great driver, but he didn't figure it all out by himself. So it's just making sure you grab those opportunities where they can so you don't miss any of these easier goals to score in this sense, because every bit of it helps to try and encourage more opportunity to be created in the first place and for then people to then take them.
Exactly. And I think that's another area that we've really got to work hard in, is showing that there are other aspects of motorsport to just drivers. Because that way then you are encouraging, you're opening up motorsports to a far greater amount of people than just saying you can only do this, driving that will be a co-driver. Do you know what I mean? So I think all of it's extremely important.
What we want is kind of weirdly what all the drivers were in the 1950s, where you did have a driver who was a driver, a mechanic, you drove to the race, but you just want that for everyone. You need to have everyone have that little bit of knowledge there. And it's a little bit amusing that we want what we already had. We just didn't realize that quite at the time. We went such a long ass way of going about it.
Exactly. I think that would help a lot. And also I think you've just got to have like more transparency with things, because I feel like, and I think the series Drive to Survive really did help with that. Like, you see a lot more behind the scenes, you see a lot more transparency between what really goes into what makes a champion or what kind of hinders them at the end of the day. Like, and I think, that kind of transparency. And I think rallying has a long way to go, even in that aspect of transparency, but also just kind of opening up. And it's still a very, very closed realm. And if you're not already involved and you're not in it, no one really cares, if that makes sense. Like,
and even
there's still a long way to go.
There's so many moving parts to rallying and across. Just if you want to take Europe alone, there's so many moving parts in that it's just like, okay, you've cracked part of it, but it's still so many other puzzle pieces that you've not quite figured out where they go yet.
Yeah, and I think we still have a long way to go in diversity and inclusion in rallying, like, for sure. I mean, there's not many females still involved that are going to make it to a higher level. They've kind of all diverted through other avenues. And it's sad, because you sit there and go, rallying, I feel like, might be the best opportunity to get someone quicker, because the way it's structured is much less kind of hierarchical compared to Formula One. Like, you kind of have to have completed Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1.
There's a very straight line path there, and it's kind of, there are other ways in, but this is the most straightforward one. Whereas rallying, you've got, like you've got so many moving parts there that you never know quite where you can come into it from, and there's more opportunity there, in theory.
Exactly. And I think that's something that definitely needs to be explored a little bit more. And I mean, that was my goal. My goal was to be one of the first females to make it to top level WRC since Michelle Mouton. Unfortunately, life had other plans for me, but it's kind of one of those things of, it doesn't mean I don't want to help the next person. And I think, again, that's what's different about rallying, is it's more kind of family orientated. Like, no one really truly, I mean, you are in competition with each other, but everyone's still got that kind of camaraderie and that ability and drive to want to help. And I think that's something that kind of needs to be shown a little. I just wish rallying was more mainstream, but I do wonder if it will ever be more mainstream than it currently is.
Do we need Bernie Ecclestone to go and deal with rallying next?
Yes, we do. I really do think that it would make a massive difference. If we could find a way to show that rallying has as much commercial value as F1, if not more, I don't see why it wouldn't survive and live around a lot longer. But when you're closing the market off in like WRC TV, really only true rally fans are involved at that point.
Based off back of that, then what has been the most challenging thing for you to overcome that, and has that helped you with your racing?
So beforehand, this last year, I would have had I definitely overcame my most challenging thing. Back in 2016, I had an accident and I damaged part of my right eye and I lost partial eyesight. And it was a question of would I ever get back in the car and would I race? And my instant answer was absolutely 100% yes. And I did. I carried on racing for another 6 years. Yeah, I went to the spoke to doctors and they were like, well, if that's all you can see, that's all you can see. I was like, well, I can see 20/20, so we're all good. And so I carried on racing, got to pretty much every year where I wanted to be in my career. I was on track into an R5 last year, which was really exciting. And obviously COVID was a really hard year. I mean, you sit there and go, oh, I've not really thought about my life outside of rallying. I don't have a life outside of rallying. And now you're telling me I can't do it for a year. So that was interesting, but I still found ways to stay involved. I mean, e-competition became a thing. And when rallying started opening up again, I went straight back out in a car. And then it wasn't until last year where I had probably the biggest season planned. I was going to do the European Championship in an R5. I'd got the money, I'd got the car, everything was ready to go. And I went out on Poland. And of course, Poland being Poland, I had an accident. Annoyingly, that created another issue. However, this was in my left eye. So I lost partial eyesight in my left eye. And at that point, you kind of can't be like, I'm going to jump straight. I mean, I did. I was like, I can still see, so I'll jump straight back into a car. But then, you've got voices of reason going, you kind of need to find out what's causing it, because I had no idea. The first time they had no idea what was going on. So I kind of went through stopped my season and went through all the medical things of what I needed to find out. And now I'm at that hardest point in my life, I think. And I don't know whether it's going to take me back racing. And I think that's extremely difficult for me. Pardon?
We'll have to circle back at some point.
Yeah, I know. So it's definitely an interesting one. I am hoping I'll get out in a car again, maybe at the end of this year. I'm not going to throw any more out than that. But whether it's going to be to the level that I wanted to achieve, I don't believe it can be, because I don't believe my health would allow it. And that's really frustrating, is you kind of had something thrown at you, a 1 in a million of it doesn't even really make any sense or anything. And it kind of stops you in your tracks. And I think the hardest part for me is, what am I meant to do outside of motorsport? I kind of gave my life to it. I didn't have any backup plans. I was like, I still have another 5 or 6 years racing before I need to figure out what I'm actually doing with my life. And now I'm sat here and I'm like, I didn't make any plans. I didn't have anything outside. And so I now think one of the things that I need to work on, or include in ever a role model for other people, is you do need to have that backup plan, even if you never use it, because it will be much easier than kind of getting to a point of your whole life kind of stops and you have nothing to fall back on. So
that's the whole silver bullet thing. You'd rather have that in your back pocket and never need to use it than find yourself in your situation.
Yeah, it sucks. I've hated it, and it's been a really, really tough year. So yeah, it might help me with my racing, but it might also help me to find a new path within motorsports, which is what I'm currently trying to work on.
So I'll expand that to racing in terms of both on and off the tracks there, in terms of being involved.
Yes.
And cover it that way.
Exactly. I mean, I know that Hyundai boss opportunity is still available,
I was going to say this might be a very short question and answer for the next one, but then 2022 plans?
Trying to find a way back into motorsport, whether it's in the driver's seat or out of the driver's seat. So yeah, just figuring out life.
So as you mentioned how the esports kind of really came into it last couple of years or so, because there weren't really many other options. Would that be one path where you want to explore, or if you more kind of it's got to be the real deal or nothing?
I was really bad at esports, so I probably wouldn't explore it. I think what was the hardest part for me is I'm a driver that deals with feeling. Like I feel what's going on the road. And you can't get any feeling in a eSIM chair, like not unless you're doing it on a racetrack, but they've not kind of invented it for rallying yet. So I remember I was like doing it at home. I couldn't keep it on the road. Like there are people far better than me out there for esports. I mean, I might commentate on it or like present it, you know what I mean? Like sign me up for that, but I probably would stick to the actual driving than driving.
Pure real world driver. I prefer that anyway. A couple of fun non-motorsport related questions finished off then. One of which was, I noticed that you have taken to a liking for baking over the last year or two. So what is your favorite thing to bake?
So I'd be honest, my favorite thing to bake is probably not the most interesting thing in the world.
That's all right.
But I do make a really good blueberry lemon loaf cake. It's like a super easy thing to make and it's perfect every time. Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of one of those things you can't really mess up. And then I also do
your default setting for baking.
Yeah, because it's an easy cake. Usually everybody likes it. There's no one going like, oh, it's kind of like one of those cakes. Because I feel like with red velvet or with like carrot cake and things, people go, oh, I'm not really a big fan, but you can't really go wrong with a lemon cake. And also brownies. I do enjoy making brownies a lot.
Now you're talking my language.
Yeah. And I learned to make cinnamon rolls, but that's just a very long task.
Yeah.
I mean, it tastes amazing by the end of it. Yeah. That's like a whole day process, cinnamon rolls. Like you've got to be allocating like a lot of your time for that.
I'll say special occasions only. Don't have time for it.
Yes. Yeah.
And final question. If you could create a game show, what would you create?
It's a really hard question. I bet some people have had some really good answers too.
It's always these questions people out, to be fair, so don't worry about that one.
So if I were to create a game show, probably motorsport trivia. You know, like how they have like a question in sport, but it would only be allowed to be motorsport. And then within that, each person that was on it in the different disciplines would have to try a discipline that wasn't their own.
Okay, yeah. So you
kind of have like a double thing.
It'd be like motorsport mastermind in a way, that you get the general knowledge and then, but the specialist topic isn't up to you.
Yeah. And I would love to see like different drivers take on different kind of disciplines. Let's get one out in karting. Let's get one out in dirt racing, like in the buggies and things like that, you know. Ice driving, all of it.
Just be
like,
good
just
for
swap everybody
to
around.
have as a school, so when they're learning in the first place, just throw them into a bit of everything. You'll probably get a better driver out of them that way.
Exactly. I mean, I know we've seen like what Bottas has done Arctic Rally Finland before, and then well, Kubica, he went rallying for a bit, didn't he?
Yeah.
But I kind of want to see more rally drivers go racing. I want to see if they can actually, you know, hold up. But kind of swapping all of that would be kind of very interesting.
That's why extremely interesting, because you get so many from so many different backgrounds and just see, right, let's see what is actually an advantage here and what isn't, because it's quite interesting to try and compare all of that then.
Yeah, and then, you know, we can create the perfect racing driver out of it.
In theory, yeah. Right, let's go do that. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I want to thank you for being here and wish you best of luck with everything for the rest of this year and beyond.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great chat. I know we diverged a little bit in the middle there, but
that's perfectly all right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again to Nabila for coming onto the Kerbs with me, and I want to wish her the best of luck for the rest of 2022 and beyond. Join me again soon when I'll be chatting to another famous face from the world of motorsport. And in the meantime, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and check out the other videos on the On the Kerbs YouTube channel. And feel free to listen to me talk about Formula 1, amongst other things, over on the Undercut podcast. Away from YouTube, you can follow me on Instagram at t.albers.daily.onthekerbs and read my various motorsport articles over on Is It Fast, Paddock Sorority and Supercar Blondie. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again next week for the next episode.